Okay.
David Master made himself unmuted. I know. He's keeping all the secrets. I know.
That's just my kids will ruin the share.
Yeah, that's what they all say. I know, but send them a second one.
I can bring them down with a heart, but it won't take them long.
Okay, so we're ready to start. So to first really understand a problem, you have to know the mitzias. And when you understand the problem, that's already half the solution. So we all know that our children are exposed to many negative things on the internet. But I wonder if all of us really know what is the extent of that exposure. And after we understand the extent of that exposure, I would like to hear from all of you what you think the ramifications and the issue that we're dealing with because of that exposure. So just to get a little bit of a details, I did some research in the Goyish world to understand how prevalent this porn thing is. And I'll read you some statistics. There's a thing called Pornhub, which is one of the leading porn sites in the world. And they claimed in 2019 they had 42 billion visitors with 39 billion searches performed. Now, just to get a perspective, there's only 7 billion people in the whole world. That's 150 million a day, almost 5 million an hour, 80,000 in a minute. That's just one site. So to put it in perspective, for the time it takes me to say these words, one porn site will have recorded 200,000 visits. Okay, and that's only one of the porn sites. Which means, if you think about it, internationally, for men in the Goyish world, it is considered acceptable that almost all men ingest porn, and 68% of women. Now, that's the Goyish world. And we might want to believe that maybe our Firmavelt doesn't have these issues. But in my experience, I sit with boys pretty much daily. And I can tell you that none of the firm boys that I ever spoke to hadn't watched porn. And I speak to educators, and everybody agrees that it's a huge number. There's a vikuach if it's 80, 90, 100%. But there's definitely very, very prevalent. And not only that, the issue is what age are they exposed to it? So in my experience, 12, 13 is for sure. Many are exposed to about 8 years old, and some are even exposed at 4 years old. And obviously, a child has absolutely no kalim to even understand what they are seeing. Now, with that said, I would like to hear from the Rabbeim here, because it'll open up the conversation. What do you think the issues are that stem from this exposure? What do you think the problem that we're trying to solve with our teaching, what are we trying to address? And I'm opening the floor for everybody to share something. This way it'll help me meet every single person in the room.
I'm happy to contribute first. So I think one of the problems is that the students' heads, and maybe the parents' heads as well, are full of images, and it means that learning is very, very boring for them.
Okay, so that's an educational problem, that we as educators, we can't teach as well, because their mind is full of things which are more exciting than the other things that we teach. Okay, so that's your... Well, so anybody else have anything to add?
I would say that, first of all, the way they look at the women as objects. Could the host please let Rabbi Gerber into the meeting? Hi, Rafi.
1 second, I'm looking. I don't see someone trying to get in. One minute.
Rafi, regards from your brother-in-law, Eliezer Orbach. I was Shabbos. I was Shabbos in South Africa.
Oh, wow.
Maybe he can try again because I don't see it. I don't see it over here trying to get him in. But Pinchas, can you try again?
Yeah, he's trying.
Unless we're sure, unless he just sits next to you.
I know, and I got a nice big screen, but okay.
I'm happy to let him in if it would let me.
Yeah, here he is. He's in.
Oh, good.
No, Rabbi just wants to sit next to the Chavetz Chaim there. Okay.
Zechusa Yagen Aleinu. It'll help us with this problem. Okay, so Rabbi Hartman, you said a very deep thing about being an object, and I'll definitely agree with you and add to that. Does anybody else have anything to add?
Yeah, I would just say to add that it will create a total breakdown of marriage, of relationships, and the norms have shifted.
Excellent. In other words, the pornography world is a chinuch system. It teaches our children things that ultimately, as you said, Rabbi Golker, is a complete opposite of the relationship between husband and wife, the complete opposite of things that bring the Shechina into our lives, is the complete opposite of things that are the mashal between our relationship between Hashem and Klal Yisrael. And ultimately, we're going to see actually creates dissatisfaction and deep sadness, whereas a healthy, holy relationship between husband and wife, we know, creates ultimate simcha. So this, in my mind, is one of the most prevailing problems that we had in a long term, even if the kids would learn in school, and even if they wouldn't be, let's say, doing isurim like motzi zer levatala, but the long-term impacts are so huge that if we don't deal with this, we're going to be dealing with marriages that cannot function. Excuse me 1 second. Okay. And I see that I work with young kids, and I also work with couples. And as the Rabbanim in Yerushalayim know, the marriage is in a critical state. And if you want to connect the dots, it's very easy to understand why it is that way. And maybe we'll explore that, because if we're going to teach our children, we have to undo the damage that was taught to them. And we'll have to understand how to undo that damage in a way that's positive and not destructive.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, it's President Skirk. I want to add on to the problems. Sure, can you hear the echo?
What?
Can you hear the echo?
No, it's better.
Okay. We want to give the children a geschmack when they're learning in the Yiddish guides, and all these things which they view on the internet will dampen that and take away the geschmack, which stops their development and learning.
Okay. That's actually a deep idea. Why it is that the Chedves of the Shmaitza and Pegama Bris are a steer to each other. Maybe we'll get into that later. Does anybody else have anything to add? Now,
I guess just simply put, it's how could you entertain? How could you have in your brain Rabbi Kiva Eger or Maharal when you have the opposite in your brain? You know, you can't have hafachim together.
Right. Okay. So you're saying it blocks limud Torah. Okay. Also true. Now I'm interested to hear from the staff in terms of Hasmonean and as parents. What do you think is the exposure that you have to your children and your students? Where are they holding in terms of this exposure? Because in order for us to really deal with a problem, we have to know what the truth about the Metzias is.
It's hard to know exactly, but I would imagine we're a modern Orthodox high school, and I would imagine the vast majority have been exposed, and no different to society as a whole.
Okay.
I must say there are Yechidim, I don't know the numbers, and it's hard to know for certain, who, there's a certain Tamimistic kite about them, and I'm sure that they have not been exposed. And sometimes the challenge when we sort of relate this material to a class is to do it in a way we don't sort of, as it were, contaminate those communistic kids.
Right. So, in my opinion, we're going to learn that the way to deal with these problems is not to focus on the negativity, is to focus on the positivity, and everything you're going to teach your children will be things that will, any way you want to teach them. Because the truth is, the whole topic of bris is about midos. And it's all about being a good person. And there isn't any parent or any educator who doesn't want to instill these idealisms in their children. And the truth is that marriage is something that every single child is exposed to, be'ezras Hashem, that they have parents and they see how their parents relate to them. And the more we talk about the positive things, you're going to see that naturally, on its own, they pull away from the negative things. So,
Rabbi Frenkel, can I just support what you just said? I just read yesterday a line, a friend of mine asked an Odom Godel some years ago. He says, this is a reflections of a certain Odom Godel. He said, I asked him about advice on being a better husband and a better father. This is what he said. There's an Eitzah here, there's an Eitzah there, but fundamentally it's about being a better person.
In other words, let's understand what does it mean if we're talking about the sugya of Kedushas HaBris, right? So if we really want to understand anything, we have to understand what a bris is, right? You can't be shomer anything if you don't know what it is. So fundamentally what we're saying is we want to teach our children what is a bris and what are the midos that make a bris and what are the ramifications of having a bris, and then you can decide if you want to do that in your life. And that is a totally positive experience. I'm going to elaborate on that in the future, in the end, but I first want to address what I see as the negative impacts of this, the exposure to this world. I really want to put it down on paper. And, it's a little bit painful. Maybe you would say that we would rather ignore these things. But as educators, I don't think that's the right thing to do. And if you need to recover afterwards, I don't blame you. But it's still important we know what our kids are dealing with in order for us to really be properly able to teach them. So on a very simple level, if you think about your own marriage, right? The level of connection that you establish with your wife and the satisfaction and the enjoyment depends completely on your development in midos. And the most important midas v'ahavta l'reacha kamocha. Adam yada es chava ishto, to understand someone else, someone who's different than you, and be committed to what's important to them and what's loving to them as much as you're committed to doing that for yourself. And that is the foundation of every marriage, and it's equally true, it's the foundation of the zivug between the marriage, and that's why it's represented in the Kodesh HaKadoshim as the kruvim, because we know that the kruvim were, that the Gemara in Yuma says, were dvukim like ish v'isha, that the full experience and understanding of ish v'isha is really the relationship between us and Hashem, and it's the most holy thing, and it represents that the world was given to us as a matana, as a gift of dveikus with Hashem, and the most fundamental midah that exists in the world is ava. And it's also the most fundamental need of a human being for that reason, that every human being is chasing love, because love is the very fabric of the Bria. Now that's and within that context is the context of a zivug, which should be and can always be a complete expression of love, commitment, caring for each other, and these are the midos that make a happy marriage. Within a pornography world, the number one midah that is expressed is being selfish. Is totally caring about myself or somebody else. This person is caring about only themselves. And the person that is also in that story is there to serve me. It's what Rabbi Hartman said on an object level, but in the midos, it's extremely destructive, that it teaches people that what this word is, which is called sex, means I am using someone else. And you can see this, words are extremely powerful. they include midos very much. So if you think about it, how do you say, and we won't have to say the word, how do you say to hurt somebody? Internationally, in every language that I checked out, internationally to hurt somebody, there's an F word. And this is the word that's used to describe a chibur between ish ve'isha in the porn world. Which means the natural midos are, I don't care about you, to the point of which I might even hurt you because I am so invested in myself. And our kids are being taught that this is what goes on in a relationship between man and woman. It's the complete opposite of what we want to teach them. And therefore, there's, in all of the actions that go on over there, there's literally no connection that happens. We don't have to go into the details right now how that looks, but the kids come out with an understanding that there's no expression, there's no interest. We're not trying to connect. We're trying to have an experience of release for a man, and that's it. That's the whole point. In other words, you can see it by kissing if something doesn't happen within porn. Right? We know the whole beginning of Shir Hashirim, which is a depiction of the most beautiful love poem there is in the world, it starts with a kiss, because a kiss is an expression of Yizdabka Rucha Berucha, a connection, the deepest connection there is. That doesn't happen in the porn world, which means that kids learn, there's actually studies to show this, that they plan to engage in a sexual activity without any kissing, 41% of between 12 and 14. I read this on the internet somewhere. That's an insane thing. In other words, between the boys and the girls that you're dealing with, right, in the modern Orthodox world, there's a change in how they relate to each other, that it used to be some early romantic thing, that there was some kind of dimyon to what they're going to do in marriage. Now it's not that way. It's not what's going on, Bichlal. And they're also learning that this has no, every time, we all know that as men, the midah that allows us to be holy is that we have the right place, the right focus, this energy we have inside of ourselves, to apply it to the relationship we have at home. And we're relating to all the rest of the women in the world, it's not relevant, because this is a human being, this is a person, and why in the world should my taiva be expressed in this relationship? But in the porn world, every single interaction is about a sexual experience, which means that a boy is always thinking, if he's trained by the porn world, this woman next to him is a potential experience of znus, which means they can no longer relate to the person. And I want to show you something, which is, we need to be very careful about this, is that when these midos are indoctrinated in a person, even the Torah can be used to make these midos worse. Because let's think about what do we teach our boys, especially in yeshivas. We teach them Shmiras Einayim, right? Shmiras Einayim could be another expression of that midah. That the woman that I look at, there's no way for me to look at her differently besides the sex object. That's why I can't look at her. When the real tikkun amidos is, this is a person. And I have no interest in connecting to this person that way. I am interested in teaching this person as a human being. So the midos that are expressed in the porn world can be exacerbated by the Torah we teach them if we don't understand where the kids are holding and what the mashmos of what we're doing is teaching them. In other words, we always have to focus on the midos that are being taught. It's not so relevant the actions of what they see, the actions of what they do. What the relevant is, what does it mean inside for themselves? What kind of person are they becoming through these actions? Another huge impact of this is that violence is a natural part of porn sites. The way it works is, in a human being, is it starts in a certain exposure. After a while, it gets boring. So it has to be more intense and more intense. And how can you make more intensity? Because there's actually nothing there. It's totally empty. So they do more things that make your hair stand on end. And the worst part of this thing is that the way they treat the women is abusive. And the way the actors are depicted in these things is the women either have no reaction or are actually happy. Which means our boys and our girls are being taught that to be physically abusive to a woman is a positive thing. Something she likes and he enjoys. Now you have to understand that when you watch these things, it's teaching what is enjoyable. It trains the brain. They did a study with a monkey, and the monkey, they put a little thing on his brain to see the brain waves when they gave him peanuts. And certain pleasure things turned on in the brain. Then they gave a different monkey, peanuts. And this monkey was watching the other monkey eat peanuts. And the same experience of pleasure they had watching the other monkey have peanuts. Now what that means is that what is depicted on that screen as positive and pleasurable, this poor boy who's watching this thing, the first time he watched it, he may say, Hashem Yishmor, what is that? The second and third time, since they're enjoying it, he's going to be taught to enjoy it. And what that does to a person is it teaches him that being bad is something that he wants. He knows inside, every 3-year-old can tell the difference between good and bad. Hurting someone, no one thinks is good. But why am I enjoying it? Oh, I am a person who enjoys bad. And once a person is convinced by the Yetzer Hara that they're bad, there is absolutely no gvul will or go. Right? We know the biggest matana you can give to somebody is say, you're good, you're holy. But if we have hours and hours of chinuch telling a person that he enjoys bad, well, look at what we're combating.
I would just like to add that something I just hit me, that you don't see the concept of kissing by animals.
Right.
It's only a human thing.
Because humans making tvekus and animals are doing an action. The action, to really understand intimacy, you could give a mashal to like a mother who takes care of their baby. Right? So a mother does all kinds of technical things. She changes a diaper, she feeds him, all kinds of physical actions. But the midos, the love, the caring, the bitachon that is instilled in that child is way, way beyond those actions. And of course, it has everything to do with how the woman is doing it. If she's talking on the phone while she's feeding her baby, then it becomes just a physical act. What we're trying to teach our boys, which is the opposite of what they're being taught, is that intimacy is not a physical act alone. It represents an entire world which goes way, way beyond anything they're doing in that bedroom. And it's actually something that is fulfilling and beautiful and brings happiness to the world. And the porn industry is teaching people not only that violence is good, but marriage itself is boring. Actually, they teach them through different depictions that niyuf is much better than marriage. What's really fun is doing Isurei Torah, is doing the worst churban there is in the world. That's fun. And being stuck with this ball and chain woman for the rest of your life, that's a horrible thing. Right? So this brings, like someone said, I forgot who said, the utter destruction of marriage, not only in the fact that they can't maintain a relationship, but they don't even want to go lechatchila in the relationship. I give a dating class to boys, which to prepare them how to date. And I can't tell you how many boys are afraid to get married because they're going to be bored. A boy just told me, he's like, why can't we just get married for 2 years, get divorced, and find another one? This is where the boys are holding nowadays. They think it's boring because that's what they're taught. And I actually have to sit with them and explain to them on midos level why that's complete sheker. And it's just the most important thing to remember about all of these things is that we have a chinuch problem. If we say, and this is one of the things I'm very against, just talking about filters. If we say to them, you know what, this porn thing is so incredible. Wow, it's the most amazing thing in the whole world. That's why you have to protect yourself, because there's no way you're not going to fall into it. We're feeding into the Satan. Because emes la'amito, it's actually ra. It's actually tamei. And what Hashem says don't do, the reason is because mikol v'kol, it'll bring sadness and destruction and lack of pleasure. And things that Hashem said are mitzvos will bring you ultimate satisfaction, even in olam hazeh. So really, every single thing that they're teaching us in the porn world, the bottom line is that it's sheker. And really, if we give them das, they will choose on their own to do Dvarim Shev Kedusha.
he is? What type of background this boy had? What type of...
He was born in a beautiful family in Har Nof. His father spends hours of his day learning Torah. He went to a yeshiva in a high school in yeshiva in Eretz Yisrael on Rehov Katzenellenburg, and I forgot the name of it. And the reason he's by me in yeshiva is because he felt that the yeshiva system did not give him what he's looking for. And one of the things he didn't give his looking for is he can't honestly talk about any of the issues that had. One of them was that he was abused as a child in that yeshiva, and the yeshiva blamed him for doing that. Which is another thing that I wanted to get into, is that I deal with an insane amount of abuse happening within children. And we need to understand that sexual abuse is a natural derivative of porn. And I have to say another strong statement, which is hard to deal with. The more from, the more abuse. It's clearly documented. The more from, the more abuse. The reason for this is twofold, as far as I know. Number one, lack of education on basic midos. In other words, it's encouraged in the porn industry. And I once saw a brilliant doctor, a Christian, who actually documented this, that people who wrote a book in the 40s, which encouraged all forms of sexual expression, including incest and including fathers and daughters. This became the textbook for the American Association of Education in Sexuality, right? This is the midos that they're teaching, and he shows how the porn world is just a continuation of that. And so when you understand that the natural gvulos of the world are being broken down, so I can't tell you how many boys have come to me, 13-year-old, 14-year-old, and saying, what's wrong with touching my sister? And those are the good boys who come and ask the questions, not the ones who are not able to ask questions. So number one is an education problem, because I think in the modern Orthodox world, it's much better that that's not even... In fact, one of the boys told me that he was originally in the Haredi system, and his parents left the Haredi system, and now he's in Chorev. And in Chorev, it's absolutely unheard of, even though our sisters are hot, but it's unheard of to touch your sister. Now, even that statement is already horrific, because I didn't grow up like that. I didn't look at my sister that way, and I don't think it was normal at all to look at your sister that way. So we have boys who are more educated, who are, even though I want this, but I'm not going to do it. We have another system where they're not educated, and also the kids are afraid to talk about these issues, as we're going to get to soon, of understanding how our chinuch system works. So what we have is little kids who have a lot of education from the Sitra Achra, have no parents involved, and their sisters are the korban. It comes sometimes in the expression of a loving experience that happens in sisters and brothers, and then the sisters are even asking for it, because that's what happens when a person is abused. They tend to try to make sense of their abuse, and they get connected to their abuse. And also it happens in an abusive way. And as a little girl, I don't usually work with the girls, but in this situation I was working with a family I was very close with. And one of the girls told me, the boys don't understand how much they're hurting us. And this is, again, a basic midos issue, that v'ahavta l'recha kamocha, in order, we all know as men, in order to have a beautiful marriage, you have to understand how a woman works. And as a boy, they not only don't understand how a woman works, they don't understand the pain they're inflicting on a little girl, because they've been taught that, of course, this is totally legitimate. I even have to say something which is even more painful to hear, that, and I don't want to go into the numbers of this because it's just too difficult to deal with, the issues of fathers and daughters. The issues of fathers and daughters is a prevalent issue in Yerushalayim, Yer HaKodesh, and again, it's a huge lack of education. This is the reason this is happening. And also because when a person is already trained to be in the porn world, the level of dissatisfaction that they have in their life is insane. and they look for everything in the world to try to fill this void. Which brings us to another topic, which the amount of, and maybe you can see this as teachers in the school, but if you look at, especially if you're teachers of older teachers, you can see the difference between the years about people's matzav ruach, the boys' matzav ruach. The level of depression, even suicides are up, because the way this is rigged, and we know the Satan is behind this, that you try to fill something and it's empty. So you try again, and it's even more empty. And you try again, and it's even more empty. And that's where the concept of addiction comes from. So people are being exposed for hours to these things, which makes them more empty, more dissatisfied, more sad. And as you said before, they can't concentrate on anything else. So they lack a tremendous amount of positivity in their life. So what are we going to have? We're going to have depressed boys. Do you see that? The older teachers, do you see the change in the generations of how the Simchas HaChaim, natural Simchas HaChaim is?
I think what we see is that there's huge mental health issues, and the question is, how do you define mental health? If it's in the way you've just described, then very much so.
Yes. Now,
for example, getting the kids to volunteer and to be givers in that way, is that just another way of dealing with some of these issues, aside from the keeping them busy aspect of things?
There's no question, and I'll go into this in detail, that the younger years of a person, when they're not meant to be married because they're not emotionally mature enough to actually hold a relationship, right? That's why we don't marry them off when they're in high school, is meant to develop the midos that they will use later in a marriage. And to the degree that they develop those midos, you will see they will have simchas achayim because they feel the growth and the satisfaction of doing the things that they're intended to do. And not only will you find that satisfaction exist, you'll find it having less of a need for a sexual expression because they're satisfied in the level of midos that actually their internal being is looking for. That's a deep concept that I'll need to explain in graver detail, but I agree with you that yes, we want to encourage all of the chinuch that we're doing is to encourage all of the expression of midos that are necessary to be in a marriage, and that itself will be a refuah with a few other things. So before I go on, just that I sent a outline in the chat box that anybody can see it now. I would like to move on to understanding how our chinuch system deals with these things. But before I go, does anybody have any questions at this point?
Again, the point that I just want to clarify, the point that you're saying also is that it's like drinking salt water, that the more you drink, the more thirsty you become.
Exactly. Now,
I'd also like to add as well, I think these students have a lot of guilt. They're feeling guilty about what they're doing, and it means there's a natural rikuk from the limud. Feel very detached.
Mm-hmm. They feel guilty, and this brings me to the next point, is that they know they're doing something bad because they have an underlying understanding, even if their parents never spoke about it, is that we don't talk about these things. These things are not positive. So they are, by definition, feeling bad about themselves and also feeling not comfortable to talk to their parents because of the topic of taboo. Right? It's uncomfortable, it's not proper. So let's think about this. Our kids are being exposed to a chinuch system always, and we as a society have decided we don't talk about such things. Now, there's no question that there's a natural reason to do that because it's a topic of tznius, and it's not supposed to be exposed. It's not supposed to be talked about in a frontal way. But what I'm trying to teach and point out is that that's only if you're talking about physical actions. But if you're talking about the midos, of course, we as parents want to talk about the midos of marriage. We want to teach our children how they have loving relationships, both with their friends, both with people they're not married to, treating a woman like a person, and of course, the most important relationship we have in the world is the future relationship you have with your wife. And there's no reason why parents shouldn't be talking about that with their children first of all, as a dogma between the husband and wife, and also in the siach, in the conversations that happen. And once we put in these ideas in our children, they suddenly have two choices. They suddenly have two worlds. And they can already on their own make choices. And they'll be comfortable to talk about, did you ever see anything differently than this? What did you learn from this? But it depends on us to go to the children, open up the lines of communication, because if we don't, they're going to be alone. And what happens is that when we don't do that, the teens have an entire subculture. There are things that the kids are involved in that you wouldn't believe is possible as parents because they don't talk about it. As I gave the example when we met the first time, something which is probably happening in Hasmonean between boys and girls, since there's two schools and they're very somewhat connected, is that it's completely normal. When I say the word completely normal, I check this out. It's completely normal in frum circles and in not frum circles to send a message to a woman or a girl that you had absolutely no connection with and say, can I see a picture of you without any clothes on? And the most insane thing is they do it. The women do it. And what does that teach you? Since I'm not teaching women, and I don't know if all of you are teaching women, but it's a topic that needs to be addressed. And I leave this topic to my wife, and she does an excellent job teaching the girls. It means that the women have lost complete self-value. We talk about tznius. This is the worst expression of lack of tznius, because tznius means that a person feels they have value, and they're going to keep this uncovered to give it to somebody who deserves it. Now, every Tom, Dick, and Harry, for some reason, deserves the most precious thing she has. And why is that? Because it's completely normal in the world. Do you know that it's normal in the porn world for people to record what they're doing with their girl? And not only is it normal to record that, they send it out to their friends. So you can imagine what happens to a poor girl in a modern Orthodox setting, which all kinds of things happen between boys and girls. And he has a camera, because that's normal. And he sends it out to all of his friends. What do you think happens to that girl? Her self-worth. It's unimaginable. And this happens ma'asim b'chol yom. And us as parents have no idea.
Well, so can I just come in with two nakudas? Number one is, a lot of what you're saying is very broad. Really, it's also for parents as well, not just for מחנכים. And in a way, not just for parents, we must have mentioned it before, beloved master, that we're picking up the pieces from the lack of guidance from the parents, which makes it almost impossible, because as much as we're going to repair the damage, they're going to make more damage. And the second nakuda is, which is not really related, is, I can speak for myself, we've never directly addressed this with the Talmidim, who I think all of us get on well with the Talmidim. How do they react to it? That's a completely different nakuda, and something we need to feel confident and comfortable with.
Okay,
What is their reaction? So two things as a parent's perspective. Is it important also to address the parents? It's quite difficult with our schools. And the second thing is because of the restrictions or nature of the discussion, not just sensitivity, but what we're allowed to say. And second thing is, how do the students react? If we step in and say things which the parents may be tolerant of, or just, what is their reaction?
Okay, so I want to address the first issue. So when
So maybe just before, I just want to just make sure I understood the point that you said before. The physicality, obviously, we can't speak about it with our children, the tznius, but the midos behind it, we could. Could you give an example how we could speak about the midos, but not about the physicality?
Yeah, I would love to do that. I think that it's a whole topic, and I would like to not do things in a mediocre way. And then the next year, I'm going to open up that in a very detailed way, and I think that we should leave it for then. Okay? So I want to address the first issue you said, of Pinchas. First, when I created this model of teaching, so I wrote it for parents and for teachers, because the truth is there is no difference between parents and teachers. In fact, parents, like you said, can be more effective than teachers. So if I had my way, I would make an entire meeting for parents in every single school and bring up exactly the same type of things for them. That would be my goal. And if you can accomplish that in Hasmonean, that's great. Because the truth is, as you're saying, maybe parents are uncomfortable with the teachers talking about it. That only lasts for about 5 minutes. As soon as the parents realize, no parent wants their kid watching porn. No parent who is a Jew and no parent who's a Goy, because they know it's not good for them. And they were looking, and I don't think anybody's tolerant saying, oh yeah, I don't care if my kid's that doing this stuff. They want it to be different. So, of course, parents should be taught this. And if you can accomplish that, matov manoim. Is it true that when the parents are not involved, the rabbeim can't have an impact? In my personal experience, kids come to me all the time. I almost never speak to their parents unless it's an issue of abuse and I have to report it. And I move the kids very, very deeply. So, and that really goes into the second topic you said, which is, how do the kids react? And I will tell you, they react with such thankfulness. It's like, hallelujah. Now there's an adult who's actually with me and is not judging me. And of course, it's very important to know how to do it, which is I'm going to get into in the third shiur, because if we come in, the way our chinuch system works right now, right? There's a lot of hate. There's a lot of fear-based chinuch, right? What do we teach our children about this topic, right? So what is the main thing? Kedushas habris. And I looked around. I went on the internet. I looked on YouTube, and I talked to rabbeim. Principally, it's about the negative. It's about the averos of zera levatala and all of the shading that you're going to create, and all of the things that will go wrong in your life, and it's more dramatic as they possibly can make it. The better, of course, is, because when people have drama and they feel terrible about themselves, that for sure works much better in chinuch than anything else, as we all know, right? But that's what happens. People fill our kids full of fear, and what really happens is fear, as we know, like the Vilna Gaon says, that yiras ha'onesh is only short term. It only works for a very small amount of time. But at a certain point, when the kid's like, you know what? Okay, I'm verfallen. I'm going to get all these onshim. I don't have a choice. And not only that, God hates me because he put me in the world with this desire at a 13-year-old. I have absolutely no way of actually beating this challenge. And nachdem, he's going to kill me. That makes for great chinuch. And then, what happens when our children come? They have a smartphone in the school. And it doesn't happen necessarily in a modern Orthodox school, but let's look about our chinuch in general. If we catch a kid watching porn, or we catch a kid with things he shouldn't be doing, what is the reaction? What is the reaction from parents? What is the reaction from rabbeim? How could you do such a thing? It's horrible. So what do you think? The kid's going to be open to talking to you about it? All he knows is he gets hate for a nisayon that he didn't choose, that he has almost no kelim to deal with. It's not his fault, and he is now hated from his parents because he fell. So not only do we have a huge problem, let's look at what our chinuch system is actually doing to solve this problem. Very, very little. And there is another solution which is very prevalent in let's say yeshiva gedola, and I remember going through this myself as a young bacher. When I was 17 years old, I had no idea, because no one taught me, that zera levatala is an issue. Right? There's a famous Chassam Sofer which says that he was nenash because he didn't teach his talmidim about zera levatala. So that was my experience in going to yeshiva ketana, and I only found out about it when I got to yeshiva gedola. So what was my reaction? Fire and brimstone. I'm going to be a holy Jew. And I'm going to shut down this koach hanefesh of myself completely and totally. Right? So you're saying there are some boys out there that are tzaddikim and tmimim. You have to check on these tmimistic boys. I wouldn't use the word tmimus as a problem, but the ones who are quote unquote holy and they don't do isurim, what is the carbon in their future life of shutting down this desire? How many marriages are destroyed because a person has been taught that the expression of this desire is negative? I once saw a YouTube of an English fellow, and he said the following words. He said, the reason why the sexual koach is so important in a marriage is because it expresses your most lowly, horrible self, and she doesn't reject you. right? This is the message, the Christian message that has been indoctrinated in our firm, whether we like it or not, that when we teach boys that in order to survive this nisayon, you have to make sure that this desire is completely shut down and not channeled. All it teaches us as subliminal messages, this is bad. So either the entire topic is bad, or the boy who falls, he's bad. And we know when a person thinks a part of themselves is bad, it's like having a Medina you're trying to protect from an enemy, and you give him half the Medina. It's like, here, this is yours, right? If we believe that a part of ourselves is bad, that is exactly the mitos of Christianity, which made a nitzuk between neshama and guf, and we see what happens. We see that either they are dead or they're abusive, because this has to come out. So where does it come out? It comes out in negative things, because anyway I'm bad. So the whole association with koach is when I hurt somebody.
That's the Gosha, the Maral calls it.
Yeah, they blame it on the Rama more in Nevuchim. So, but definitely the Mekubalim did not go in that direction, and that's the chinuch that we even mekabel from all of our tzaddikim, both in the Hasidic world and the Litvish world. And it's obvious. There's no way. And not only is it obvious, we have to understand what the kids are holding nowadays. The kids who are born in this dar are extremely developed spiritually, even though they have an incredible exposure to filth, but they also have a nekudas ha'emes and looking for something meaningful that is more advanced than our dar. I see this all the time. So if we try to sell them lakshin, they know it's sheker. And any kid in this generation will know that if you tell me that it's in order to be holy, I have to cut off my body, they're going to see right through you and say that it's wrong. So
is there any merit in putting in some sort of rules or restrictions on the devices because of the principle miyasa ben v'yechte, or just to let it run its course and we'll pick up the pieces afterwards?
It depends, because everything is mitos. So it depends what it does to the person. If the message and the way it's put down is, I'm so weak that there is no way for me to withstand this thing, and therefore I have to put on a filter, you're actually making this person more weak. You know, I always give this mashal. I grew up in Denver, Colorado. And in my grade, we had Mechalei Shabbos. Russians coming from Chutz La'aretz, from Russia. And I never had a havamin in the world that they're going to mashpia on me. I was completely clear to me, I'm going to makar of them. And when I went to Eretz Yisrael and I put my kids in schools, they were super scared of this bad apple kid. He's going to mess up the entire class. Now, what's the message? This Yiddishkeit thing, it's not that strong. It's not that important. In 1 second, you can lose all of your Yiddishkeit, right? So if the message is, you can't withstand this because you're a weakling and this is so amazing, then a filter actually does the opposite. When is a filter a valuable thing? When a person has already been koneh their own decision-making process. I want this, I don't want this. And since I don't want this, I don't feel like having a nisayon all the time. What for? Right? Lo lidei nisayon. We make aseh siyag the Torah to say, I'm going to put this over here, and that's going to be my way of expressing my bechira. So it comes from a place of strength.
Isn't there a bit of a middle road over here? Because we can't leave out to a kid of 15 to appeal to his midders when he's got a desire.
Okay.
Some sort of middle road over here. For example, in the school, there's so many rules for everything. If there's a school rule which is not coming from Rebbes, doesn't that help the parameters a little bit? Okay,
so it depends. Control. What does control do to a person who's a Baal Bechira? A Baal Bechira, a Tzelem Elohim, has a need to make their own decisions. If we take away their Bechira by controlling them, we are making them, there are two things that will happen. Either they become a nechei, right? They become a person who is not fully developed, or if they're more developed, they will throw off the ol because you controlled them.
What about Odessa's Nekudas HaBechira?
So we're going to learn about Nekudas HaBechira because that's actually the key to everything. But the word that you said was Bechira. Bechira means, by definition, this boy is choosing. And in order for us to conquer something which will go in every room of that boy is living, the only solution is himself. The only solution is his conviction, what he believes in, what he wants. He'll make the decision.
But with everything else going on in their lives, we don't run a kid's life like that. This is right and wrong, you make a choice.
It depends.
Here's kosher and treif, you choose which sandwich you want to buy. We don't deal with it like that in the rest of the Yiddishkeit.
Okay, so we can talk about this generation, if that's going to work or not. It's a whole chinuch question, because kids in this generation are going to question everything, and they're going to, if it doesn't have meaning, they're going to drop it. So should we be encouraging bechira at a young age or not? We can have a whole discussion about that. And for sure, we can encourage bechira in situations where it's danger, right? If the possibility of, if a person would come to say, listen, there's heroin in front of you, you choose what you want. We would never do that because we can't take that risk, right? That's not a loving father. But if we notice the way Hashem runs the world, he never takes away our bechira, ever. He puts the Torah in front of us. This is going to happen. If you're not going to listen to my mitzvahs, this is going to happen. Now you, my friend, my dear child, bacharta b'chaim. So we can have a discussion, and a chinuch discussion, what we need to do in terms of kol Torah kula. But in this situation, you can't really have a discussion because we have no choice. There is no way that this kid is going to be matzliach to misgaber on this taiva unless he chooses himself. Just to give you a dogma of this, okay? I sat with a boy this morning. It was 9:30 in the morning, or actually it was 7:30 in your time, and I've been working here for 3 weeks. This is the third week. And this person he's not such a boy, he's close to a man. And he has been watching porn for years and years and years, okay? I learned with him the discussion of what he wants. I never discussed porn with him, not one time. What is he looking for in a relationship with a woman? Okay? And he has his phone is jihad, which means there's nothing he can do in order to get to look at anything. He has to go to a store, buy another phone, watch, and then break the phone. That's what he does. Kiseder. And I asked him, tell me something, when you buy that phone, how do you feel? He says, I feel like a melech, because I bought the phone. So we talked the whole time about what he wants. 3 days ago, he went and he watched porn because he wanted to. And he sat there and he watched it and he got to the conclusion, I don't want this. And on his own, for the next 3 days, he had complete access to porn and he never did it once. Why? Because he knows what he wants. That's called bechira. And if we empower children to see tov v'ra from a chitzonius place of where they're exposed, they're taught, and from a pnimius place, they're helped to understand what they want, they will be matzliach. And it's not...
A boy of 11 years old that would work with?
Well, you see that a boy who's 11 years old doesn't have das, right? He's not mechuyev in mitzvahs. So he needs to be taught. There's a famous... the brother of the Maharal says a gewaldige shtickle. He says, the Chazal say that a boy, until he has 13, he's kula yetzahara. And then when he's 30, he has mechuyev mitzvahs, then he has a yetzer tov. He says, I don't understand. He says these kids, young kids, 8, 9 years old, the sweetest things in the whole world, their yetzahara, what does it come out? They're beautiful. When the problems start, when they get to be 13, how does it make sense? So he says that until 13 years old, the boy has yetzahara, and who is the yetzer tov? His parents. And his parents are developed people, so it comes out beautiful. At 13 years old, suddenly he has Yetzer Tov, and now he's supposed to make which decisions himself. He turns to his parents and he says, thank you very much for all your chinuch. Now I want to choose. As we see at 13 years old, has a very good time telling their parents, no thank you, I don't want your chinuch, go take a hike. That's not a chisaron, that's a maila, because this person becomes a Baal Bechira. And suddenly, when you have a Baal Bechira at 13 years old, he doesn't have a world worked out so well, so what happens? Chet. This way, that way, and it's a tipeshes ray. It's a difficult time, but that's a lechatchila mahalach for a person to develop their own understandings of the world and their own decision making. So, of course, an 11-year-old, actually, the teaching will be enough, because they don't. If you expose them and you say what is good and not good, they'll trust you. At a 13-year-old, they'll start thinking themselves and they'll start exposing themselves. So at a 13-year-old, then you have to teach them what the kid wants. You have to expose them to their own ritzonos. And when you do that, then they're capable of being miskaber on the craziest nisyonos because I just don't want that. Right? You know the story of Rabbi Akiva and Meseches Kala that he was exposed, he was given to 2 zonos, right? And the most beautiful zonos in the world. And he didn't want them. And it says, the zonos came to him and they said, what's wrong? What did we do wrong? How could you not want us? And he says, you smell like shkotzim v'ramosim. So when we look at this chazal, we say, wow, eza madrega, Rabbi Akiva. But the truth is, it's not such a madrega. If a person actually is misbonin panima and understands what they want and understands what the mashmos of everything they're going to do, they can get to a place at a young age, this is gross. I don't want this.
We don't have 600 Rabbi Akivas now still.
You don't have 600 Rabbi Akivas, but if you teach the boys, they will become very powerful beings. I don't think that it's a mikra that HaKadosh Baruch Hu put in this dar, this nisayon. It means he believes in our children, and this is what I think in the Nekudas HaBechira is very important. He believes in our children that they can get to a place of Bechira. Will it happen overnight? No. Is a 13-year-old supposed to mekayim kol haTorah kula at the age of 13 without any nisyonos? Absolutely not. Right? How many boys in your school say Kriya Shema B'zmano in the summer? Right? How many of the boys actually keep Shabbos? Some des, some do, this. That's a mahalach. What?
Quite a few.
Quite a few. But sometimes they might do things on the side. They have to work it out, right? They have to go through a process. That's a healthy process. So the process that we want to teach the boys, 13, 14, 15, is to develop their own insides, their own choices, and come to a place where I want this and I don't want this. And you'll see when they get to be big boys, they're very solid. Because they spent years developing their pnim, looking towards Tov, looking towards Midos Tovos, looking towards a beautiful marriage, and that's what they'll do. And they'll be much more prepared for marriage than the boys who didn't have a struggle 20 years ago.
Is just 2 nakudas, if you don't mind, sorry. The Gemara says in the Torah, ikidaka achrina, likirosha.
Right.
So we're giving them a darka achrina. And the second nakuda, which is a bit connected, Hasmonean school, there's the Rebbes and the Kodesh staff, and there's a school. What we're doing doesn't necessarily, the school's got its own mahalach, and it's whether it's not in a negative way, it just doesn't deal with this at all. How would that work out? If we're giving them a message, but the rest of the school are not saying anything, just blind about the whole thing, and in denial about the whole thing.
Well, I think that once you open it up with a boy and you give him a place, a person to talk to, and a chinuch system, you don't, not all of the same way only one person teaches Gemara and they still learn how to learn Gemara. If some Rabbeim deal with this and the rest don't, it should be successful.
Okay.
Now the Nekuda of Ikadak Achina, Lekadak Achina is again in Midos, right? Ikadak Achina means this person chose to put himself in a nisayon that he didn't have to do. Why did he do that? Obviously he doesn't care. Our children are way before that. They don't have a decision. All they're doing is flowing with the world. It's like, oh, what's this? My friend said it's fun. I'm going to go look at it. Right? They're not even in a situation of yes, no. They're just, we didn't teach them anything. So they're going to look at Kol Davar Aser because why not?
Just to add the point here, Rabbi Golka is a manal of the school, and he oversees, it's called PSHE, which is basically sort of life skills. They do discuss some of these matters, and Rabbi Golka oversees the content. So, like, it controls a bit the secular influence in the school. They do have quite, they have it like throughout every year group. They don't discuss these matters every year group, but from year 9 onwards they do. Actually, year 8 even.
Yeah, that's true, Amos. But I think what Rabbi Frenkel is saying, that the way we're going to succeed with this is by teaching midas and enabling them in the longer term to make right choices. That's really what the root of this is. The PSHE is not about, it's not Torah, it's not teaching to make the right choices in Bechira, so that responsibility is ours.
I mean, I imagine it's quite shallow as well, and it's got secular influences as well.
Yeah, and in a way, it's a government requirement to teach it, and I make sure that the content is not anti-Torah or something. They're not exposed to preachers, whatever it may be. But the kud over here is for us to be mechanech our kids, and we'll see Mr. Hashem in the next 2 sessions, I'm sure, details about how we go about teaching midas and enabling them to make the right choices.
Yeah, just to add one more point as well. Sometimes, like I teach year 9, and year 9 set 1, a good class.
14-year-old.
Yeah, you always get the impression that sometime during that year they probably get much more exposed, a lot of them, and feel I can lose my influence as Rebbe because they feel they can't speak about this with me. There is no outlet at all, and that's quite a shame. And I'm just saying, possibly, even if the solution is ultimately the sort of one rabbi in the school they go to, still feel as their main Rebbe that they want to respect, that there's a problem there from their perspective. They can't go to me because they can't talk about these things. They have to go to a private room. I'm just saying that is an issue. Often the Rebbe has a real relationship with the students, and that these very, very important life matters we never ever talk about. And
the Master Rabbi Frenkel said he's going to address how the Talmidim respond,
yes.
and then Rebbe deals with it. This is what we're going to hopefully address.
I think take Rabbi Gerber, for example. I can tell you the students absolutely love him, remember him for years and years, and he can have a very great influence on them.
But we've never dealt with this before.
No, we don't deal with it at all.
The only thing I'm just struggling with is how kids can go home with open access to YouTube and anything he wants on all the devices at home with open Wi-Fi, and we come to school, it's like a tip of a yam to try and sort it out.
You have to realize that that's actually a life situation, because as an adult, there is no gvul what they're going to be exposed to. Literally no gvul, and it's not hard. You don't have to spend 5 minutes. You can get a prostitute. You can get a prostitute in the frum community, a frum girl. Easy-ish pie. And how do I know? Because they do it. They tell me about it. It can be a married woman. It can be not married woman. You get to choose. You get to choose a child. It's easy. So it's not like you have a problem in high school. This is a life problem. So it's actually true based to what life is going to be. The fact they're exposed to everything, and we have to help them within that exposure.
Can I rephrase the question? Does it help if a parent puts a normal, reasonable restriction on the devices at home as a bit of a message for the children? That's not hefker.
Yeah, it for sure can help, but it's like anything. Control is not chinuch. Rabbi Yaakovson said once, he said, control is actually a destructive thing. It's like stira amanas livnos. That if you knock down a building, right, and you don't rebuild it, you just do destructive things. But sometimes you do destructive things in order to build, right? You knock down a building in order to build a better building. So if you're talking and teaching, you can also put restrictions, because you're saying, I love you, this is what it's important, and I want to protect you, this is the rules. But if you don't teach, all it's going to do is make the kids say, oh, my parents are controlling me, I don't want that, and I'm going to do it behind their back.
So I'm going to teach them, let's say it goes really well, one of us, but we are not in a position to put down any restrictions.
Right? You don't have to. And you could have a conversation with the parents once you have an open relationship and say, look, I wanted to address this point. There is no secular human being who wants his kids watching porn. It doesn't make a difference how secular Hasmonean is. They know there's a problem and they want a solution. Right? So they will participate as long as you don't feel that you're doing negative things to their child. If you're helping them in the midos level, why not?
Right, Frenkel, if you began the session with the statistics that whatever the number of men and are watching, then how can they be happy to say that I don't want my kid to watch, but they themselves, that's their achayim?
There has never been a person that I know of who watched porn and was happy about it afterwards. It doesn't happen because it's
He
sheker.
may be watching himself, but he still doesn't want his kid to watch.
Of course, like people who are at Machal Shabbos and they send their kids to frum schools.
No, Frenkel's saying more. Not only that he's watching, he doesn't want his kids to watch. He's watching, and he himself would not want to watch.
Right, 100%. Part of the, it's like Rabbi Zion Abba Shalom said that the process of sending the Sephardi kids to school is also a way of being makar of the parents. Once a parent has to deal with their child, they also mischazik because they start learning things, and that's a mahalach lechatchila. So yes, I firmly believe that teaching this to rabbeim and parents help the rabbeim and the parents.
When you speak to the kids, obviously you do, what do they say is what they want most?
So we'll talk about that in the next session in grave detail. But I want to address the point that you said before. It's very important that the whole world realizes a problem with porn. But here, because we are B'nai Torah and because we're Talmidei Chachamim, we actually have something the rest of the world doesn't. Let me express this to you. I once gave a shir in Efrat. And Efrat is a modern Orthodox place. And so some of the people sent me messages and said, what right do you have to talk about these things? Are you a psychologist? Are you a social worker? Now, if you take this model and what they're thinking, they are thinking that it's an emotional, not healthy expression, and you need to be a health professional. And to describe it to you even more, it's an addiction issue. And in order to really deal with the problem of addiction, you need to be an expert in addiction. And if you take a look at, let's say, there's a very, very good site called Guard Your Eyes. Why is it good? Because they care. And they're putting a lot of energy into it. But the underlying principles, the underlying discussions over there are all discussing the issue of addiction. And how they use something called a 12-step program. And they're trying to teach their children not to be addicted. Now, what's the message of that? First of all, the only problem is that you're doing it. Not the problem what you learn from it. Right? And the second message that it gives over is that the same way alcoholics have an issue with alcohol and it needs to be shut down, people who have an issue with taiva, that's addiction and we need to shut it down. And this is actually the chinuch that yeshivas are taking on because they see problems with their boys. And they're using this chinuch method to help people with addictive problems and actually not addressing the shorish of the issue. The only way that we are a gift to the world. We have the Torah, which means we can teach them about the dveikus between Hashem and Am Yisrael, the dveikus between husband and wife, as such a positive thing that this person will choose on their own not to do this. This is a message that we have that the rest of the world doesn't necessarily have. So it's dafka, the mechanchim of the B'nai Torah, who are the people who can solve this problem, as opposed to the secular world, they will be lost because they will understand it's an addiction problem and only deal with that part of it. So it's actually totally our responsibility and our ability to succeed more than any other group of people.
Rabbi Frenkel, can I add one thing?
Sure.
I just came off of a trip with 40 non-from kids, and also my time was just speaking to the boys in Hasmo. It's amazing. They all want to be helped. I mean, as you said, they recognize the problem and the issue and the fact that they don't like doing what they're doing. They really feel empty. There's no brainer. They have no alternative. Mm-hmm. So the second we provide them, some type of fulfillment and inner satisfaction, they don't have to run after that. They're going to be so grateful. They are looking for it.
Exactly.
Help.
Exactly.
Rafi, you found that it was an age program that you just ran?
Yeah, 40 kids, JFS, Yavne, Habs, etc. And we had a whole conversation about this. There's a new app. I don't want to say the name about it, but it's basically a porn app. And they were telling me all about it and how they feel it's just so disgusting and vile. And we all do it, but they just feel like it's so ich and so wrong and so. But they got another option because that's what they're into, and that's what is fulfilling their needs and desires, despite the fact that they anyway go clubbing and do it in real. But I guess they all want it. As I was saying, they all want to be helped, no matter how from or not from they are. They all want the help. They see the emptiness of it.
I have a Talmud who's a musician. He lives in Tzfas, and I taught him about marriage. And he gets all of the birthright kids who come to Tzfat. He is the one who gives them an experience. And he brings them to the mikveh. And he says, and he also was brought to Duke University in America to give an experience of Shabbos for these boys, these people. And he says, when he talks about the topic of mikveh, and the topic of intimacy, and the topic of Taras HaMishpacha, he has every single person interested, hungry for the things that I taught him as a chassan. And he actually says this is so powerful that he wants to sit with me a full, long period of time to really, really get it, because he wants to teach secular Jews, or Goyim, it depends on where he is. Everybody's hungry for emes. And the emes is, the biggest emes is Dveikus Pashem, which is Dveikus Ish V'Isha. That's the biggest emes. And we can teach that. So, any other questions?
I know there's a principle, Sabna Da'ara Chatbu, but American, English, and Israeli, different mentalities. Have you come across the differences, how you approach it and stuff? Just to bear that in mind. And number two is also Hasmonean. It's not so polarized. We have a big spectrum of kids, very frum and very schwach and a little. So those are the two things which maybe differ to Eretz Yisrael.
So it's a good question. Is there a difference? When I went to England, I was just in London a few weeks ago, before Tisha B'Av, and I was wondering, because I've never been in England before, and I had chaverim who were English, but I was wondering about the populace of England. Would they be freaked out if I mentioned something? So I gave a drasha on Shabbos for a kiddush, and I spoke about this concept of the kruvim and its dibuk v'isha, very powerful. I didn't want to go into it too much, and the people were hungry. They were asking me more, and because I think that emes is everybody wants. The people have different chinuch. Europeans different than America, and Americans are much more poets that discuss anything in the world. Europeans are more withheld. But if you start talking about the panim of emes, they're hungry. Their neshama pops out of their goof, and they said, "Teach me more." So I don't really think there's a difference. Okay, so unless there's any more questions, I want to present a synopsis of what is the derech that I would like to teach. Okay? The first step, and it's not just a piece of information, the first step is we need to expose people to their core. We know that every one of us, even every human being, is a tzelem Elohim, and kal v'chomer a Jew who has a neshama, which means the shoresh of all of their desires is something which is kadosh and beautiful. And when you connect a person to their essence, the beauty and kedusha that comes out of them is superpower. It's nuclear. It's something that they can always, if they want, access and use in the decision-making process. As a chinuch system, we don't do this enough to connect people to their neshamas and have them understanding the world from their neshamas. Here it's imperative. We need to go, we let the kids go inside, and I always say the most important kli for personal growth in general is listening. Listening. Hearing the koilis. There's shtei koilis, right? There's the call of the Yetzer Tov and Yetzer Hara. Sometimes we don't even hear it. We don't even hear the Yetzer Tov because we're not listening. But if you let this part of you talk and expose, and be exposed to it, this is the power that drives every one of us to do good. And what happens is, they begin to realize, I am good and I want good. And no matter what I saw and whatever I was pulled to, that's a klipa. It's not the shorish of my desire. What really I want is tov. As one beautiful boy, he says to me, after going to your shiurim, I realized that when I was 4 years old and I looked at these things that were not snuas, I was really looking for my wife. Right? That's a panemius understanding. So when we need to expose people to their core, this is the power that allows our kids to have the power to make good choices. And again, the second thing we need to always teach them is about midos. What happens to a person? Everything we do develops us. Everything we do shifts our insides and we become a different person. A person who puts on tefillin is not just he did a mitzvah, he gets a V in Shamayim. It impacts how his whole Amunah system is in the world. His belief system changes. And everything we do is like that. We either get closer to Hashem, we either become more of the midos of Hashem, or we get farther than the midos of Hashem. So to show the kids what happens to themselves when they make these choices and they see these things, that ignites, wait a minute, you know what? I don't want to be that person. I don't want to be the guy on that screen. He's actually gross. I want nothing to do with him. I want to be like the Chafetz Chaim, or I want to be a person who has Reb Chaim Kanievsky, who had a beautiful relationship with his wife till Ad Sof Yameh. I want to be like that because that's what I want. And then when you get exposed to your innards, and we'll talk about this in detail, you'll see that every single person wants a marriage. They know deep inside themselves that a marriage is the ultimate fulfillment, and anything that is a begida in the musig of marriage will actually make them sad.
Frenkel, maybe you're going to address this at some other point. We haven't really touched on the topic of LGBT. So you have a guy who has a same-sex interest. How does what you just said fit into that?
Well, if you want to open up that topic, I first want to know how you're dealing with the topic in general, and then we can discuss, the topic. This person...
In a nutshell, the way that the school's mahalach is that we're living in a society which legislates and allows this behavior, but this is not the Torah mahalach, etc., etc. In a nutshell. In other words, we acknowledge it, we don't criticize it, it's not for us to make further comments, but we can say very proudly that the Torah doesn't allow this behavior. But the point is, if there are people out there in the classroom who have those feelings, is it true to say what you just said, that in their opinion they want a good marriage, etc.?
So this is a very, very difficult topic, and there's a lot to talk about, especially in the chinuch you're doing. But I will say that, practically speaking, I once gave a shir, and there was a boy who was gay in the shir, and he said to me, "You have thoroughly convinced me that what I want, I am totally gay, because the things you're talking about in a relationship with women, I absolutely do not have." So, on the other hand, the midos that I'm talking about, they all relate to. So, there is some criticism that someone told me, when I teach men and women, because that's what I believe in. And they said, "Why do you teach like that? The midos are the same for a gay person, just with the same sex." So I'm not interested in encouraging that. So I'll still teach the way I teach. But on a midos level, they relate. On a talking about a woman, they absolutely do not relate.
Okay, maybe we'll talk about it in the next session. But we'll have to be a bit mindful of that in terms of our approach and how we teach it in school.
In general, you're going to have to be mindful of anybody's LGBTQ, because I don't think there's a bigger sevel in the dar that I've been exposed to than those kids. The suicide rate is so high, and you have to wonder, the kids that leave your school 10 years down the line, what's happening with them. And it's something to check out, because the whole sugya is a very not pashut sugya, because on the one hand we have a halacha and we have the Torah. On the other hand, these kids literally can't live. So I'm not telling you halacha l'maaseh anything, but we have to be aware of all of the mitzias and what's going on with this person. And he thinks he's bad for being created in a certain way, and he also has been miyayish on any experience of love. Either he has to go against Hashem or have no love in his life, and that is an entire sugya that needs to be addressed equally, but it's a separate sugya, and it's a sugya dafka for them. So what I'm teaching is not to deal with those problems, because that's a very, very serious issue.
Yeah.
And by the way, the numbers are crazy. It's getting worse every day. It's clear that this is something that is a spiritual mahalach, for whatever reason it is, that we're going to have to deal with chaos in relationships. And that's one of the reasons why I'm pushing so hard for marriage, is because it's becoming an extinct thing in some degree, that people are more... There are so many kids nowadays who even if they're not gay, they will do gay practices as part of their experimentation, and even entertain the possibility of doing that in the long term, because where the world is holding, and the porn world has definitely encouraged that, because it encourages kol davar shaba'olam, including gay things. So we're gonna, in that sense, we have to deal with the exposure that kids are doing everything. So, but I still think it's a separate topic.
With your experience, these Chudas nets across the board, would you say that the Hasidic, Litvish, Sephardic, and Mizrahi approaches all different, all one same approach? How to deal with this?
I don't think anybody has an approach.
Other than denial, that's not an approach.
Right.
Denial.
So, as an approach, as a worked out mahalach, how do we solve this problem? I have never met any kehila who has anything to do with it. What I will say is that it's clear that the Sephardi kehila is more healthy. They often do not fall in porn. They spend their time falling with girls, which is arguably more healthy. And the Hasidische from Litvische Welt, they only fall with girls in an abusive way, like in a prostitution way, and they don't usually make relationships, and they are much, much more steeped in porn. And like I said before,
I meant to ask, sorry, slightly differently, as Mechanchim, how is it dealt with in those communities?
It's not.
It's not dealt with.
I have never seen a chinuch system to deal with it besides fire and brimstone. Or the new mahalach, which is being pushed in certain yeshivas, which is based on the 12-step program, which is about looking at it from an addiction perspective. And I hope I was clear that I think that misses the point completely. Completely. It's only nezek. In some ways, if you want to, I'll say it very gas. We want a man to be addicted to his wife. We want him to have all of his power directed to this one woman. Why in the world should we look at it and say this is a problem that he has desire? That's wonderful and beautiful. Can we make it good Kodesh now? To really look at it, the 12-step program is very Christian based. So,
could you explain it just in mamish? It's not a sugya. Why the numbers of gays and so on is rising, skyrocketing more now than 50 or 100 years ago?
You want me to megalad you the Sisri Abriya? I don't know it. I don't know. But it's not just, there is, people argue that it was, now they're able to talk about it, and before they weren't, which is, that could be. But it's very clear, if you look at the kids, how many kids are gay, their gender, they don't have any idea what their gender is. And it's literally, it's very wonderful, but every mishpacha is probably going to have to deal with it on a child or grandchild level.
Wow.
Yeah, I suggest the Orchana Kodesh says, the reason why you get to is like the Mishkazocha with Reva and Nirvas, when you do one time, you get sick of it. So because so much is tolerated nowadays in the world with regular forbidden typers, and it goes further and further. That could be the reason why. That's
for sure true. You can watch that in the kids. You can watch that in the porn system. And that explains maybe energetically how the world is holding like that. But I have talked to so many beautiful children who are not exposed to anything, and they are built this way. And the last thing in the world they want is to be built this way, and they are built this way. I have a little boy who was in the Haredi system till he was 13 years old. He, from the time that he was, anytime he's Oimed al Daita, he thinks he's a girl. His whole family thinks he's a girl. And he has no idea how to live. He cries that he doesn't have a rechem. And he doesn't know what to do with himself. And every single place he goes, he's hated. Because why? What did he do? He is just being himself. Now, what do we do with that boy? Any answers? I have been wondering this for a long time. And my job is usually to sit with people and talk to them and listen to them. Very, very difficult. No matter what you're going to go, whatever direction you're going to go. And that's the same thing with the gays kids. I know a kid who is suicidal, literally suicidal until they were 20, and they decided that they are gay. And I'm not taking any hechsher, not hechsher. And they said, that's it. This is the way Hashem created me. I'm going to do this. And this person is not suicidal anymore. I didn't say they don't have a struggle because they have hate from every direction in the from world, not from world. But
Abi halacha, is that the correct thing to do?
I'm not mukhshar enough to have even done that shaila.
Doesn't sound right correct.
Right, but one thing is clear: before you done any halachic shaila, you have to done the mitzias.
Yeah.
And the mitzias is that oile me yitzri, oile me yotzri. There's
We can
there.
always say if someone wants to dismiss the issue, and even though he'll die from it, it's too bad.
Yeah, that's wonderful to say. Now imagine, Shalom Nidam Mitzarot, your son is in front of you, and he's telling you, "I can't live." How many? Let's be honest. If we told any boy, you're going to have to shut down your taiva for the rest of your life. That's it. How many would be matzliach?
But what I'm saying is, we haven't got a feel as mechanic to deal with it if that's not the right thing to do.
Before we discuss the right thing to do, let's discuss the mitzias. There's two choices over here. Either he does something which is chomer ma'oid, right, chiyav misa, or he pretends to shut down his desire, because a woman for him is like you desiring a man. It's impossible. And he has desire. He has the same koyach hanefesh as we all do. What do we want from this boy? I'm not saying in a day, but this is a problem.
The Gemara says someone's going to try for a tzika. They have to deal with it a different way.
Okay, so if that's successful, then you can try. I never saw a boy who was able to shut down. Yeah, but I never saw a person who was successful to shut down his desire for his whole life. Never saw such a person. So if you think about it on a emotional, spiritual sense, right? Hashem created me to fail. It's a terrible, terrible insight. The pain that these people go through, unparalleled. And like I said, we're all going to have to deal with this, either with kids in the school, and you'll see it's getting worse and worse. Families, you're going to have to deal with it in your children, grandchildren. It's going to be there.
Rabbi Frenkel, I'm aware of the time. I've had a couple of texts from 1 or 2 rebbes who are traveling back today or whatever, and they're keen to join for Thursday's session. What would you suggest? That they watch a recording of this one, or could you do like a 5-minute sort of review at the beginning of the next one? What's your recommendation?
I definitely think that to really understand everything, they should look at the recording. I'll just tell you in general, I never ever record. And the reason for that is it's very hard. These are very sensitive topics. And you've seen over the course of the conversation, a guy watches a recording, he watches it for 5 minutes, he says something, he thinks this is weird, he goes away, it doesn't work. So, in the intro, I'm willing to record because it's not as important. But for a person to really invest and understand and not come out with kilkulim, I'm very worried a recording is not way. If someone is in front of me and they tell me, I think you're saying something crazy, and they have a conversation with me, that's great. If they have a recording, I don't know what's going to happen.
Rabbi Frenkel, I'm very happy for you not to send out, don't send it, but if you prefer not, and you prefer to do a sort of summary at the beginning of the next session, then, and if you prefer that, then fine.
How many people think over here, I can summarize what we just said for an hour and a half and 5 minutes?
But what about could we have access to the recording?
Yes.
To do Chazara?
Yes.
Where?
I just did 2 different types of recording. We'll see which one works, and I'll send the one that's the one on the Zoom is easy to send over.
Okay, send that to me, and then I can send it to the other rebbes. But I'll tell them on strict conditions that not to forward it on, and B, to watch it properly, not to sit back and do it.
Right. And
Maybe the other rebbes want to join 15 minutes before the next session, just to catch up. An episode summary after they've watched the recording. They won't come in just greeners.
yeah, I'm happy to when I put in the time over here, I'm happy to do an hour and a half and another half hour of complete discussion. So if you want me to switch it and do it earlier, I'm happy to do that. But I do think with the recording, and if they come in and they ask me any questions, I think that's a safer thing. But I've done the intro, and I think that's, I mean, you can tell me, does anybody think that something's able to misunderstand over here?
Again, if they're listening with half an ear walking down the street, and then it's very, that's possible.
Yeah, I agree. So if they really commit to looking at it, I mean, it's your staff. So if they're committed to taking it seriously, then I'm very happy to come into the next year after that Hagdama.
I must say that I feel, after learning and hearing this for the last hour and a half, a lot of tremendous chidushim for me. A tremendous boy from St. Louis, Missouri, and I'm serious. I need a chazar.
Okay, so the next year we'll do a chazar in the beginning.
Okay. All right, so Mr. Hashem, Thursday, the same time, 9:30 to 11 UK time.
Same time, same place, yeah?
Yeah, vakasha.
Say the
Thursday,
share.
the same time, same place. Beseder Gomer.
Okay, thank you very much. Colton, Hatzlacha with your move.
Thank you. If anybody wants to ask any more questions, I'll stay on.
Thank you very, very much.
My pleasure.
Colton.
Thank you.
All right, we see you.
Shkoyach. Rabbi Yisrael.
Yes, Rafi. A pleasure.
So it's very interesting. I was so because I was speaking to a lot of the boys, both in Hasmonean and the non-from schools. I wondered if there's a difference between those who are not from and those who are from in terms of how much and what they actually are doing, online. Meaning, my gut would tell me that those who are not from and therefore they've got more access to real women, that they're going to be less interested in or less drawn to the pornography. Have you seen that at all? Is it true that the from or less exposed physically, the more that they have this drive towards trying to find it online? Therefore, it's a harder insight for them.
It's definitely true that when a person has access to a real woman, they will do that more than a porn thing. But it's not a replacement, because if you realize what the push is, why a person does negative sexuality, the pushes can expose themselves all the time, and they don't have access to a woman necessarily at that point, or they don't want to because of all kinds of emotional reasons. So they end up watching porn, and the proof of that is that the secular world records, well, they have all the access they want, a huge amount of ingestion of porn.
Right.
So, but it's a good question, because it shows the point. It shows the point that it's not really about satisfaction of desire. People tell me, they said, if I'm so, the reason why I look at porn is I'm so shut down. I'm a bacher and I can't have a woman. That's why I'm so shut down. So I at the same time, a boy told me that. The next session I sat with a married person who is being boged and doing all the worst things in the world with all the women in the world, and they both came to me with the same problem. I feel completely empty. Right? So it's not really about what a person does with women, it's about the mitos. Right? If you have a real relationship, it's satisfying. If you don't, it's not. So you don't have to have a relationship, and you deal with your insides, and you can be a very satisfied human being until you're ready to have a relationship.
Nice. Amazing. These counterfeits which they're going for, whether it's the physical way that they're treating a woman based on how they're watching things online, or just watching, or whether they're being by themselves in their toilet or something. The midas that we're going to be learning how to grow in them, that's going to act on both their desire to watch pornography and also to
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Great.
Okay, I'm going to go. Rabbi Yisrael, thank you for your time, and we look forward to seeing you on Thursday.
Likewise.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye. See you.
Call to Sean.
Shalom.
Rabbi Yisrael, about tzlacha. I just, it's so important to learn these things, because if that's the mitzvahs, you can't live in a dream world. To me, it sounds on the gvul of strange to obnoxious. But okay,
yeah. The truth is, when we learn the sugya, like any sugya, there's a incredible romamus that happens to a person, because we're learning the emes, we're learning the kedusha. And so it'll impact you on your level relationship with Hashem, relationship with your wife, just because you're being mamik in a sugya, which is very important. And to me, that's the point.
So to understand the right way, so you got to go to the deep into what's happening today and understand what's so terrible about it, and then mitoch hachoshech to see the or.
There's never been a generation who is looking more for love than our generation. Never. And we were older and we had an interest in getting married, but it wasn't eish lahava. And these kids are more developed in the sense that they are midos, they're looking for the real thing. So, in my opinion, the ribui hachoshech is only to make ribui ha'or. Like the rubber band effect. You pull, fall away, they're going to come back.
Wow. Okay. I definitely want to hear this session again. I'm going to, when I'll understand how to access it. But I can just tell you that Rabbi Stemmer, he spoke to the boys just a few minutes, and they opened up to him.
Yeah, big time. I'm closer in age to them, and I work in the Northern schools as well. But I was shocked, totally shocked as to what was going on in their lives. Be it the top boys in the top shirim, to the lower boys.
Not boys in the top shirim, mamish the loading.
Yeah,
mamish. Some of the boys have done everything mamish with a girl, everything.
With a real girl, really
with a real girl. Some up to that. And lots of them are mamish watching a lot and are very upset about it. There are one or two that have told me that they never got into it. But yeah, I would say out of 99% of them have all watched or are struggling with it.
Rafi, did you meet anybody that says I enjoyed, I like it, and I'm very happy about it?
No. Zero.
No.
0. They all are not happy about it. They've got in beira. So we were just doing on a surface level of like, okay, fine. So how many times do you go a week right now? And like, okay, fine. So 3 a week. Okay, but say that. When is it? Okay, normally it's Monday, it's Friday. Okay, how about twice a week?
Wow.
All right, let's do twice. And they would text me, Rabbi, only twice a week this week. I managed twice a week. Once a week. Only once a week. Like we were going by that, but that's very surface level.
Very.
You're not dealing with the issue.
Rabbi, so are you affiliated in any kind of way to the Chofetz Chaim Yeshivas?
No. I mean, I went to a high school called Yeshivas Chofetz Chaim in Baltimore, but that's not part of the same Chofetz Chaim.
Right. No, the midos, whatever. That's what they stress the whole time.
Makes sense.
Yeah. Okay, but I gotta go.
All right.
All the best, and we'll see
Shkoyach.
Call to.
Shkoyach Rav Yisrael. Thanks a lot.
My pleasure.
How was that?
It was beautiful. I mean, as long as people are receptive, I'm always happy.
Yeah. Baruch Hashem. I think they are definitely. Shkoyach, really excited.
Me too. Okay.
In terms of the other one, the Maxanachim. So I just finished a trip yesterday, so I was just full on until now. The other one we could try and organize. I wonder if it'll be easier once we've done these 3 sessions, and I've got it from the inside. I'll be able to push it a lot better.
Right, probably.
I think.
Probably.
So yeah, let's wait till then, and then I'm happy to really go with it.
Yeah, right. This his name just escaped me. Very beautiful person, Avi Levinson. You know Avi Levinson?
Yeah, but it's still on record, by the way. I don't know if it's a problem.
Yeah, let me stop the recording.
Recording stopped.
So Avi Levinson is he's very on this, and when I sent him the Mechanchim, he forwarded to the governors of Menorah grammar. So
right.
My hope is that the more it comes out, the more people are involved, then the more it'll be all over the place.
Right.